So it's a pleasure to have our own Tamal Day today, starting the semester. So the talk is about computing high persistence and homology generators in R3 efficiently.
Okay, so let me begin with what I'm up to here. So we all know about persistence algorithm by this time probably, and is one of the cornerstone in topological data analysis. And it has been known for a while that the persistence algorithms, the original algorithm runs in n cube time if there are n simplices in the filtration. But if you do clever manipulations using matrix operations, then you can bring it down to n to the power omega, where omega is the matrix multiplication exponent, which is right now 2.372 something. So it's less than equal to 2.373. So it is less than cubic, but more than quadratic. So right now, the persistence algorithm in general can be executed in order n to the power 2.737 something. Okay, so that's the status. Now we know actually there are cases for which we can do better. Okay, I'll mention those ones. And this talk is about figuring out one more case where we can do better, and that case is important from the application point of view. And I think it was not obvious, but once we develop the algorithm, it looks like it's not that hard. Okay, I call it as computing high persistence and homology generators in R3 efficiently. I'll talk about what do we mean by high persistence. Probably this is a term you have not heard. And homology generators, probably you all know, is the generators which generate the homology group, computing those generators explicitly given some triangulations. Okay, so how to do this efficiently? This is all about algorithms, but I designed this algorithm exploiting something known from computational topology, particularly zigzag persistence. It happens to be that that's very useful here. Okay, so let me go over usual slides a little bit so that I put everything in context. So a simplicial filtration is a sequence of simplicial complexes which are nested, as I show, and you can, from it you can produce a persistent module by operating the homology functor on it, where the inclusions turns into linear maps. And so this is a persistent module, and HP by HP I denote the pth homology group taken with a field coefficient. So these are vector spaces. Okay, and as we already know that the sequence somehow gives the notion of birth and death of homology classes, or at least definitely birth, and it may not die. Some of them are infinite. So, and this notion of birth and death and pairing them up, this is the main concept in persistent homology. Okay, so this is the simplicial framework, right? And here is the very well-known cartoon picture by Bob Grist. I think he put it on the web. I stole it from there. And this is a simplicial complex which is growing, as most likely this is the Rips filtration. And as you are putting more and more simplices, things are getting born and things are also dying. The homology classes are born and are dying, and this is represented by these bars. So we all know about that. So these are the two-dimensional homology classes, one-dimensional homology classes, zero-dimensional homology classes. So for example, here some class has been born a little before it. I assume this is the one. I think. No, that's not the one. So most likely then maybe this is the one, which got born a little bit before it, and it persisted here, here, and then it died there. So maybe it died a little bit after it. So there is a bar from here to here because this class got born here and it died a little bit after here. So this is the bar. So the one of the main tasks of topological data analysis is compute such bars or its alternate definition of persistence diagram. So again, to do this, we have to go through this persistence algorithm. Okay, and as we all know that persistence algorithm, there have been quite a big good software, but theoretically speaking, we are stuck at n to the power omega. Okay, and I wanted to look into that problem actually, whether we can do better. No lower bound is known yet other than the trivial n square. So there is no lower bound other than trivial n square. Okay, so let me tell you what do I mean by height persistence. So this time the framework is not simplicial. I assume a topological space, although this definition goes through in general, but for this talk ultimately I'll be assuming a topological space embedded in R3. Okay, it's a subset of R3, and I define a height function z from t to the real. It's a real valued function, and I call it height function. You can take it as the z coordinate of the points. That's why I'm calling it as a height function. Okay, and not every function is a height function, but the particularly z coordinate I'm taking as the height function. And because of this height function, that if you look at the sublevel sets or the level set, they generate the persistence. And whatever persistence that generates, I'm calling it as the height persistence. It is not as general as this as any functions, because you will see in a moment that for height functions, the level sets are plane graphs, and this is something I'll be exploiting a lot. And if it is not a plane graph, then it becomes more general. I do not know how to do anything better than the n to the power omega. Okay, so what is it? Here also there is a difference between the simplicial persistence and this persistence. I started calling it as a singular persistence because here somehow the singular homology is involved. Okay, because you take a topological space, not a simplicial complex. So T sub A is the sublevel set with the function z, and we already know that T sub A is included in T sub B if A is less than or equal to B. These are all usual, and using these inclusions, again I get a persistence module where all these homologies are the singular homologies you can talk about, but it doesn't matter at this point. All the concepts are well defined, and we have the persistent homology classes, and all the notions go through. Okay, so with this one, here is something which already people know, that there is a sublevel set TA here, which is included within the sublevel set TB, and this is the inclusion, and which gives rise to these linear maps. Okay, so what I have done is the following. As I told you, that the classical persistent algorithm of Erasmus-Lecher-Zomorodian runs in matrix multiplication time. I also put this reference. I think probably that it should be credited, the matrix multiplication time algorithm for persistence should be credited to this reference rather than the usual one we give, because this is much earlier than what Morozov and the people did. This algorithm actually, it computes the something called earliest basis computation, and there is this hidden persistence algorithm already there. It computes the bar. If you read it properly, it's already is there. And sorry, S is for Strojan something. Sorry, I forgot, but this is Joe. It's very difficult to pronounce. I can tell you later. I can give it. Yes, I should have gotten those names, but it's Trojan something, I forgot completely. Anyway, I can let you know this. But if you look for earliest basis computation, you'll find it. Okay, earliest basis computation, in my opinion, is already a persistence algorithm in different incarnation. You can see it. Okay, so that is n to the power 2.373, and but here is something which was very intriguing. In 2015, Edelsberner and Salman Parsa, his student, they proved the following. They proved that the Betti numbers of two complexes which are embedded in R4 is as hard as matrix rank computation. Okay, for computing a matrix rank for 0, 1 matrices over Z2. Okay, computing that matrix rank is as hard as computing the Betti numbers of a 2 complex in R4. So these two problems are equivalent, and nobody knows whether the matrix rank computation is easier than the matrix multiplication or not. But at this point, people believe they are also equivalent, maybe. Okay, so that means it seems that breaking the matrix multiplication barrier in general probably maybe may not be possible, unless matrix rank computation is easier than the matrix multiplication, which I do not know, or nobody knows. Okay, so this is a bottle. This already gives a roadblock on computing persistence for already in R4. But then I ask the question, what about R3? Because R3 is somewhere we have lots of applications, and I give at least some positive answers for the R3 case. So, by the way, here are some of the special cases. If you take the special cases of graphs, define a function, or surfaces, or if you take the p-1 persistence for p complexes embedded in Rp, it's like 3 complexes embedded in, sorry, 3 complexes embedded in R3. If you do those ones, for those persistence can be done in n log n time, very easy. Because if you think about it, you can talk about the dual graph, and for graphs, persistence is n log n possible to compute. So these are the special cases, which are important cases, because surfaces, graphs, and these 3 complexes in R3 do happen in applications, but we can do n log n time. But what is not known was that in general, if I have a 2 complex in R3, whether computing the persistence can be done easier or not. So if I have arbitrary 2 complexes in R3, embedded in R3, whether can we do it? And what I show that it can be done in n log n time if you have a height persistence defined on 2 complexes in R3. But if, so 2 complexes in R4 already is very hard, but 2 complexes in R3, I'm telling that it is much easier. And not only n square is n log n. I was a little surprised that I could get n log n. I thought it would be n square, but no. What does it give? It gives another thing, which is, in my opinion, important. So computing the generators of your homology groups. So for surfaces, computing the generators of homology groups can be done in linear time. It's so easy. So for example, torus, if I have to compute this meridian loop and this neck loop, I can compute this in linear time. Okay, so this can be done in linear time for surfaces. But what about complexes in R3, or in general, computing the generators? So for example, computing the Betti numbers for complexes in R3 is shown to be n time almost linear, n alpha n by Edelsberner algorithm, Edelsberner and Delfinado algorithm. So if you have 2 complexes in R3, computing Betti number is not that hard. But again, computing Betti number is different from computing persistence and computing generators. You can compute Betti numbers, that algorithm does not give you the generators, the explicit output of generators. So because of this algorithm, I can compute now the generators of any 2 complexes in R3 in n log n plus k time, where k is the output size of the generators. And This is optimal. You cannot do better than that, right? And this one actually is a side effect of this algorithm. Basically, it falls out of this algorithm. By the way, so if you compute the instead of, so for two complexes in R3, the main persistence which is hard is H1. H0 is easy. Okay, H2 is also easy. H1 is the one which is hard one, and that's what I'll focus on for two complexes in R3. All right. Okay, so what is the approach? The approach is I use the zigzag level set persistence now and relate it to the standard persistence. Okay, so zigzag level set persistence I am going to tell you in a moment. So the main approach is that the following. I'm going to track the level sets. So level set persistence look at the level sets rather than the sub-level sets, but the level sets and it interactions with the interval sets between the level sets. That's the zigzag persistence does. Okay, now if what I'm going to do is I'm going to track the level sets as I am going over the heights. Okay, and I can do that one in L log n time. At the same time, I'll be computing a graph called what I'm calling it as the barcode graph. So as I'm sweeping through the two complex or through my space with the height, I'm going to maintain some kind of graph which somehow registers where the level sets or the basis of the level sets, the one cycles, they change. They create, they die, they merge, they split. I'm going to register in a graph, and then I can prove that the zero level persistence, zero dimensional persistence on that graph is equivalent to the H1 persistence on my topological space. So now once I can compute this graph in N log n time, now I can concentrate on computing the H0 persistence on that graph, which is much easier. And that's the whole approach. Okay, so I compute a barcode graph in N log n time, then compute the H0 persistence on this barcode graph, and that gives me what I want. Okay, now of course, once I have this H0, so how do I compute the bars of H0 persistence on the barcode graph? There was already a known algorithm for doing this, and I'll be exploiting that algorithm. Of course, I have to change that algorithm a little bit, otherwise straightforward application does not work. And actually I stumbled on that one for some time, that why this doesn't work, and then I could figure it out that a little modification gives me the actual bars. Okay, so let me tell you one more thing, sorry. I get only half of the bars from this approach, but there are other half of the bars I get from something different, which I get from the Reeb graph of the space. So from computing the barcode graph and extracting the bars, I get a subset of my bars. The other rest of the bars I get from the Reeb graphs. Okay, these two together gives me the whole set. And both Reeb graphs can be computed in N log n time by parser in 2012 by his algorithm. So everything is N log. Okay, so sublevel and zigzag set persistence. So let me go a little faster. Now, I assume that one has homological critical values at AIs, A0, A1, A2. These are the sequence of critical values of the function, height function Z over the topological space T. What I'll ultimately take the T as a simplicial 2 complex with the Z defined on it, the Z coordinate at the vertices and linearly interpolating. Okay, so I also need a set of intermediate values interleaving with the values of A. These are the critical values of Z where the homology changes, and these are the SIs are the intermediate value interleaving with it. Okay, the sublevel sets persistence are nothing, which I call it as sublevel with, oh, I forgot to change F. So sublevel set with respect to the function a z on t is nothing but this sequence of sublevels, and then I get the homology persistent module HP SL of ZT, which I already told you. These are the sublevel sets, but the interval sets or the zigzag level set persistent is as follows. You define interval sets Tij as the interval between the two intermediate values. So for example, here T4, 5. So AIs are the critical levels, because here exactly the sublevel sets changes its homology classes, like here, 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 here. These are the critical levels, and I take the intermediate levels here, SIs. And intermediate level T4, 5 is nothing but between S4 and S5. This is the space. Okay, now we can see that the set T44 by the definition of here, T44 is nothing but the level set at value 4, A4. And the level set at T55 is A5. And these two are included into the interval set. So I can have now, through that inclusions, a zigzag sequence. For example, so here T11 included from one side in T01, T00 includes into from the other side. You saw from the two sides this includes. So now instead of monotonic direction sequence, I have zigzag sequence, the arrows. So it alternates. And then again it gives you a level set persistence module where the arrows again alternates. So this is the zigzag level set persistence module. And by quiver theory, we know again this gives us the bars. So by quiver theory, this zigzag persistence module decomposes into interval modules, which are the simple modules where every point we have the unit dimensional vector spaces connected by the identities. Okay, these are exactly the bars. Okay. Now, one more thing I have to now distinguish is there are 4 types of bars, which does not appear in the standard persistence, but in zigzag level set persistence, these 4 types appear. And this is much more general than the standard persistence. What are those 4 types? So since the levels I have taken, the critical levels and the intermediate level, it could be that a bar is between AI and AJ, the 2 critical levels. I call it a closed bar and denote it with a bar with the 2 endpoints as closed. Okay, because basically this interval do exist at this point and at this point. That's why the closed bar. But it can happen that the interval I have gotten between AI and SJ, where SJ is an intermediate value, you convert it to AI to AJ plus 1. So I convert it, I extend it to the next critical level, but then you make it open on this right side because it does not exist exactly at AJ plus 1. I call it closed open. And similarly, you have the reverse SI, SJ, where you make open on the left hand side. So that becomes open closed. And then there is the bar between 2 intermediate levels, which you extend on both sides and make it open bar. Okay, this is, sorry, I forgot to change. This should be open. Okay, this is not closed. This is closed. This is open. So for example, here there are 2. There is a 1 which is open. This is closed for H0. For H1 in this case, for the torus case, exactly for the height function, you will get 1 closed bar, which will ultimately give you the one which is created cycle here, and ultimately it stays up to here. And then there is an open bar also for H1. Now, because of all these 4 types, there is one relation. This is actually Dan Burgelia and I proved sometime back. I forgot. I think 2009. I worked with Dan, and I told him this is something. During that time, this notion was not very well, was not standard. this level set persistence and everything. So this ultimate, this tells you how to relate these 4 types of bar with the bars in the standard persistence. Okay, what is it? It says the closed open bar you will get only if it is also a bar in the standard persistence. So this is the sublevel set persistence, which is the standard persistence. So a closed open bar in standard persistence also appear in the level set zigzag persistence. It's if and only if. Okay, but the interesting thing happens in the infinite bars. For the infinite bars, there are 2 types now. The infinite bars in the sublevel sets, they ultimately are mapped to finite, because in the zigzag level set there everything is finite bars, there are no infinite bars. So it happens to be that an infinite bar for the sublevel set, the standard persistence, it is either this type, that it is a closed bar where Aj is greater than Ai in the same dimension, pth dimension homology. But the interesting is that, or it is an open bar in a 1-dimensional lower homology. So the any infinite bar in the standard persistent is either a closed bar in the same dimension, or is an open bar in a one dimension lower. Okay, so this is something which I use a lot. This is the basis of why I started looking into it. Okay, so first we compute, so that, and this is exactly why I have these 2 sets. So we compute the bars for H1 in the level set persistent to obtain the closed open and closed bar. So I get the closed open and closed bars from the from the level set persistent, the algorithm I told you. But to go 1-dimensional lower for the open bars, you go to the 1-dimensional lower and compute it from the read graph, because now we have to do only H0, and H0 is related to the read graph, the component. So that you compute from the read graph. The open bars are coming from the read graph. Closed and open closed and closed open also come from the other one. Minus, yes, is the other one. You don't see it in the level set, in the standard persistence. Okay, so what do we do? So basically now comes the algorithm. I have to track now the level sets. So I have to track the level sets, so which is a graph, because it's a 2 complex embedded in R3. If you take a level set, it's a plane graph. The level sets are okay, and it looks something like this. Like I have some level sets. Now, as I'm approaching a vertex, maybe these things are coming together here, and then they collaborate and form something else, and that's what I have to track. So as I'm going through a vertex, now somehow the basis of H1 is changing, and I have to somehow track this. Okay, and this is done algorithmically using some data structures. Okay, so for this, I have to define something called the primary cycles and secondary cycles for the planar graph. Okay, what do I mean by primary or secondary cycles? Because I have to somehow identify some basis which I'll track, and this basis has to be very carefully chosen, and this is the way I do it. Okay, so you take the graph G and take out the graph G from the plane. So if you do that, it will dissect the plane into connected components, and each connected component I call it a face. So there is an unbounded connected component, and all the rest of our bounded connected components. Now take for each connected component, for example here, if I have this graph, if I take it, I have one connected component, another connected component, and outside. Now for each connected component, you take the boundary. individually consider it, take the closure and to consider the boundary and orient the boundary so that, okay, orientation means I have to orient the plane. Think about that. I'm looking from positive infinity there. So orient the boundary such that the face appears to the right of the curve. All right. So for example, this face, you see this boundary I am showing, I am orienting so that it is on the right. And this has also this boundary I am orienting this way because this face should be on the right. Okay. Now, out of this boundaries, now you consider each oriented cycle. For example, I take this oriented cycle, take it unoriented version and consider, take it out from the plane and consider the connected component which is bounded by it. Okay, and if it is bounding this connected component to the right, okay, then I call it as a primary cycle. So this is the primary cycle for this phase. What happens for this cycle? If I take out this cycle, I get this component, and this component is not bounded by this orientation on the right. So I don't get this orientation as the primary cycle. It is the secondary cycle. But I'll get another duplicate cycle for this component, which is a primary cycle. And I take only the set of primary cycles, and that one can show that it forms a basis. Okay, and this is the ones which I track, the primary cycles. Okay, why do I do that? Actually, there is a reason, because if I don't do it, then actually this gives me a canonical way of associating cycles to the connected components. There is a unique one for everybody, and which I can track. Okay, if I have multiple components for a basis, is difficult to track. Okay, and that's the reason I go for primary and secondary cycles. So the tracking happens only for the primary cycles, and secondary cycles I have to track, because sometimes, because of the operation, some secondary cycle can generate primary cycle, or primary cycle can generate secondary cycles. So one has to be careful about how things split and merge and what happens to primary and secondary. Okay, so the classes of unoriented cycle, okay, this is exactly form a basis of the first homology of the level set. So I'm going to track primary and secondary cycles. So you can see the way I have denoted here, the primary cycles are solids, secondary cycles are dotted. Okay, but remember, this is also very, very important to do. So for example, this one, if you take the boundary operation, this gives, it's not a cycle, but I consider it as a duplicate, double cycle. So this dotted cycle is a cycle for me, which I maintain explicitly. Okay, why I do it? Because whenever these two things come together, I need to consider this secondary cycle from which I'll generate a primary cycle, and the other piece will be secondary cycle. And if I don't maintain from the beginning, then suddenly I have to do a lot more work at that point of time. So everything I'm doing gradually, so that at every place I do a minimum amount of work, which I should be able to do in only log n time. Okay. So this is another example where things are, just to give you an idea, suppose this is a cycle right now, primary and secondary, they come together. Now the primary cycle gets split into 4, and the secondary cycle remains as it is. And then after you go through the vertex, then it may happen that some of this primary cycle join together and they split. All these things I have to track. Okay, and what is the data structure you maintain? I maintain the data structure, so I have to maintain a bunch of cycles. Okay, and these cycles I maintain using some tree data structures. Basically, those who are in computer science will know These are the balanced trees, AVL trees and 2-3 or 2-3 trees, which will support some operations. This is very important to use the proper data structure, otherwise you will not get log n behavior. Okay, I have to do the split operation, merge operation, find operations, all these things in log n time. So I maintain the cycles as a maybe a doubly linked list at the leaf, and then build the tree on top of it. Okay, in a balanced binary tree. Sorry, not binary tree, balanced AVL or 2-3 trees. Okay, and it turns out that this type of trees you can split it at certain point, given a pointer, you can split and make 2, or you can join the 2 trees into a balanced one, all in log n amortized time. And the thing is, also I can find, given an index, I can find which tree does it belong to, because you walk to the root and you see whether which tree does it belong to, again in log n time. So find operation is also important, because ultimately I need to know whether whenever some age, another age, I try to find whether they belong to the same cycle or not. How do I know? By looking at the tree and walking up to the root in log n time. So these are the operations, these are the very basic operations. Using these operations, I build other operations, split cycle, merge cycle, but these are the 4 very basic. Find, given an age, directed age, it returns which tree it is in. Then a split, you split a tree given a pointer, and you produce 2 trees which are also balanced. Then join 2 trees into one, and insert an age, and delete an age. And remember, every time I have to maintain the balancing operation, otherwise log n behavior is not guaranteed. Okay, so I'm not going to explain exactly this operation, the nitty-gritty details of how to operate, but that is where the log n thing is coming into pictures. The computer science people will be interested probably into that. Okay, so now let me just tell you, one has to be very careful. For example, here is a case. The case is, here is a primary cycle. Okay, here is a primary cycle, because this is the face. No, sorry, this is a secondary cycle, because this is the face and the face is on the left, not on the right. So this is a secondary cycle. It can happen that the secondary cycle comes and these 2 comes together. When it comes together, it splits this cycle into 2. This is one cycle, the other cycle is this one. Among these 2, one is primary now, the other one remains to be secondary. So this is only an example. Here is another case. Here is the same thing. Here is again a secondary cycle, and when these 2 come together, and you can see this is secondary, this is also secondary. So it can happen, a secondary cycle can split into 2 secondary, or it can split 1 primary, 1 secondary. And there are also other cases of primary getting split into different cases. So one needs to somehow deal with different cases, identify these cases. These cases can be identified locally, and you identify these cases locally and take the actions appropriately. So again, in the tree, remember, I maintain the tree for the cycles, but there will be some trees for the primary cycles, some trees for the secondary cycles. But the graph, ultimately I build from the primary cycle trees. But I need to maintain the secondary cycle trees, because primary things can be born from the secondary. Okay, so let me just tell you what can happen when I go from a interval set Si minus 1 to the next vertex. So the Si minus 1 is an intermediate level. Then I go to the next vertex level, and then from the vertex level to the next intermediate level. So what are the operations I do? Okay, it turns out that whenever you are going from Si minus 1 from an intermediate to a vertex, these things can happen. That you think about it, the things will come and glue together at the vertex. That's what whenever you go to a vertex. The level set, basically several vertices on the level set will come together at this vertex. So that will, again, for this one, depending on cases, we can decide the types of new cycles you get from the old cycles. But it can happen that a cycle dies at the point. This is the picture, like this cycle ultimately comes and it dies here. Okay, so this can happen, it can die. Okay, or it can happen that, as I showed you, something comes and splits because one cycle come and really got pinched. It can split, but the merging does not happen in this case. Merging happens for the other one when I go from the vertex to the next level, and in that case also the death happens when I go from the intermediate to a vertex, and the birth happens when I go from the vertex to intermediate. Okay, so this is the other case. Okay, let me not go over. So this is the new cycle is born. Like at this vertex, I'm going from vertex to the intermediate, and then new cycle I'm getting born. All right. So in generically, just this picture probably will tell you what is happening. So this is a. So think about the following. How do I compute the graph? So here is an intermediate level. Here is the vertex V. So I go, this level set ultimately gets split. I'm going to create a vertex at the intermediate level for the graph. So the graph has vertices, the barcode graph has the vertices at the intermediate levels and edges otherwise. Okay, its vertices are exactly at the intermediate level. So for this case, what happens is that I split this edge, which signifies this class, split it here, which becomes two edges. Although the cycle does not split here, but symbolically I do it this way, and actually there is an explanation. Ultimately, for the proof, I need to build the graph exactly like this. So the vertices are happening at the intermediate level, and at the vertex level I have only edges. So this is going from the intermediate to the vertex. Split happens and death happens. Death is this one, and it happens here. So again, actually the death is happening here, but I am creating the vertex of the graph at the intermediate level. Okay, so same thing for this one, from going from a vertex to an intermediate, then you have the merge case. Two things merge and you get one, like this two cycle get merged and get one, or it gets created. Again, I create it at the intermediate level. All right. So and this is the way you track and create the graph. Okay, in the data structure, you see whether it is split and who is split, and you maintain a pointer to the graph for each of the bases, and you see whether the basis is split into two or getting merged, and you join the edges or split the edges accordingly, and that's the barcode graph you compute. Okay, so now in the barcode graph, I also have this function value z, because it mimics almost the height function everywhere. So this barcode graph also has a function value z r to r, and its critical values, the vertices of the graph, are exactly at the intermediate values, and for the k, the simplicial complex or the topological space, the simplicial complex, their critical value are at AIs. Okay, so there is a shift. Okay, now again I define this interval set between AI and AJ. I call it RIJ and KIJ as the. So here the intervals are between the critical vertices of the original, because these are the intermediate levels now. Here the interval sets are between the interval levels, because these intermediate levels, because that's the way I define the intermediate. Okay, now I get two sequences again. Okay, so now look at the zigzag level set on the barcode graph, but with H0. You look at again, this is well defined, exactly is the same as the original complex, but this time on the graph and also look at the H0, the components. So you get zigzag level set for the graph, and here is the original zigzag level set for the original 2 complex. Okay, so my basic thing is to ultimately what I show that these 2 are equivalent. These zigzag levels 2 sets are equivalent. I have to do a little bit more to show that. So first thing you show that, and this is not hard. That's why the way I have constructed that the H1 at the critical level, the number of the cardinality of the basis of H1 for at the critical level, this is exactly equal to the H0 of the graph at AI. So if you go back, and that's why actually that was the motivation why I constructed like this. So for example, here H1 at the AI is here, there are 2. I have 2 components here at the level set. If I did this vertex at this level, this will not happen, and that's the shift you need. Okay, here is 1, I have a vertex 1. Same thing, you can check it here. So that's why you need the shift. Okay. So because I need these things. Okay, this is one trick which eluded me for a while. It's a very simple trick, but this is why I got stuck for at least for 2 years almost on this problem. So from the graph, the main point is that in the graph you have also closed node and open nodes. Open nodes are the ones where the vector space does not exist, is 0 there, and I do not know algorithmically how to handle open nodes. You cannot handle open nodes as the closed nodes. It is very crucial to understand between open and closed. But then I convert every open node to closed node by using some trick called the threading. And threading is nothing but why I do it. I convert the H0 to reduced homology group. So in a sense, the thread. So what I do is, there is a reason actually. If I had more time, I would have explained. But algorithmically what I do for every open node, I take a thread from -infinity to infinity, a monotonic thread, and just let it pass through the open nodes. For example, for this guy there will be this. For this open node, the thread will pass through this open node and this open node, and I'll convert the graph like this. Okay, and here ultimately I'll consider reduced homology instead of H0, and this is very crucial to prove that things are equivalent. Without it, you cannot prove it. And basically, the thread is representing the unbounded component. Actually, it is the unbounded component which the thread is representing. At the open nodes, basically something is merging with the unbounded component. Okay, so once you have done this, you have converted the barcode graph with the threading to a new graph, and then you consider the reduced homology group here, then you can show this thing is true. So this is the zigzag level set persistence for the complex. This is the zigzag persistence level set for the graph, and all these are isomorphism here. The vector spaces are exactly same because that's the way I computed it. The only thing is to prove that now these arrows are in different directions. So to take care of this one, I take the dual, the cohomology group, so that I turn the arrows in the other direction. Where is that? Oh, I forgot. Oh, here. So I turn the arrows in the other direction. So now my 2 sequences become. Now I can talk about the commutativity, and one can show that each square here commutes, and now everything is isomorphism. Each one commutes. Then these 2 levels of zigzag are same, equivalent. So that means whatever bar I extract here are exactly the bars from here. And that's the main thing about the algorithm. to compute the bars from the graph, I use the algorithm of Agarwal, Edelsbrunner, Harrer, and Yusu, and they used it for they devised it for surfaces in R3, not R3, for surfaces. And I think this algorithm is usable for in general complex, but with that modification, it runs in n log n time. So you can extract bars from the graph in n log n time. Although for n log n time you have to somehow employ some other advanced data structure called mergeable trees. But with that one, if you don't employ that, then otherwise I think you can do it in n log square n or something. I forget. I don't know. Is it n log square? Yeah. Okay. So that completes at least this n log n algorithm. So I get the graph, barcode graph in log n, threading order n, extract the bar in log n, and of course after you get the bars from the graph, you have to flip the endpoints, because I changed the vertices, the critical values, to the intermediate to the level. So for that one, ultimately you have to extend it to the actual critical values. For that you need to flip the types. So let me go through this example, probably that will be a good one. So for example, for this space here, the barcode graph initially will be computed like this with two open ends. Look at it, open ends happens at the intermediate level. This open end is because of this one, which ultimately gets created at this level, but it is open here because this cycle does exist at this level, not here. So that's why I have to keep it open. Similarly, this one here, it dies, but it exists here. So I have to keep it again this one open here at this point. Now these two are open. Now with the threading, you thread it, you connect it as, so this is the next step, and then all the vertices at the same level you can coagulate. It's the same, and then you get this graph. From this graph, with the algorithm, what I told you, you will get these 3 bars. Okay, now, okay, why do you get exactly this open? Let me not because then one has to go into that algorithm and explain, but this is exactly what you will get. Now you have to convert these bars into, because these vertices are defined only at the intermediate levels, not at the original critical level. So I have to bring these ones at the original critical level. So for example, this one I'll bring it down, make it closed. So this one, bring it up, make it closed. So this bar becomes this bar, closed bar. This closed open become closed open here, because this you extend, this you also go up, and the other one also. So ultimately you flip and you get the actual bars. Okay, so the closed open is very important to understand what is happening here. Okay, so this gives you closed open. So it gives you closed open and closed bar and open close bar. It gives you also, in this case not, but it can give you an open bar also. But that open bar is not for H1, even if it is for level set H1. Actually, for the standard persistence, that is for H2. Okay, it can give, but that will be the case. But so I don't have for H1 open bars yet, but that again I can do from the Reeve graph now. One needs to prove that the level set of the Reeve graph of K, the H0 of that one is exactly equivalent to the H0. Remember, I have to compute the 0th level set zigzag persistence for K for open bars. But then one can show that this sequence, this module is equivalent to the H0 level set zigzag persistence for the Reeve graph, because of, again, equivalence. One can show that. So that means I can operate on now on the Reeve graph. From this one, you compute the Reeve graph. Again, now from the Reeve graph, you extract the bars and take only the open bars. And that completes all the bars for H1. This picture actually, yeah, so I should not say H1, actually should be H0. Oh, sorry, no, 1 minute. So, no, this is correct. This is the H1 of the level set of this thing, level set zigzag, but then you compute the Reeve graph here, here you do the H0. Okay. All right, so this is exactly what open bars are. So I did not talk about the generators, but you can think about the generators. Generators of the two complex is given by the infinite bars, right? Basically, the carriers of the infinite bars gives you the generator, produces the homology of the space, because they are the ones which stay. So that means if I have to somehow get the generators for closed bar and open bars. Open bars are easy because you get them from the Reeve graph. Already those cycles, you get the Reeve graph and you have to map them back to the space, which can be done. And so that is easy. Now for the closed bar, what you can do, since I'm tracking the level sets, when I know when a closed bar appear, which cycle actually started that closed bar. Okay, I can track, I can compute that one there. And since I know where exactly that cycle is, basically tracking is nothing but walking through the simplices, which gives you exactly the k. It's linear in the output size of the cycle. Once I know the level, and the n log n comes from this entire operation. So that means the generators I can compute in n log n plus k time. Okay, and I think that's what it is. Thank you. Yes. No, I don't have. So maybe one of these guys can do. No, here is one thing I observed. I don't know how practical it is, the algorithm, because you have to compute. But one thing is that it's very much parallelizable. I can compute this one in chunk independently. You compute this graph in chunk. The graph algorithm is should be fast. You don't implement the in log n algorithm, but there is the straightforward bar extraction. But I can compute this bar in chunks independently and glue them together. So that one thing you can do in parallel. Otherwise, I'm not sure whether it is in practice how much it is useful. I'm not sure, because you have to compute these level sets, which probably is not so easy. Maintain it. I do not know. One can check. Okay. But the point is that you can do it in log n time. Maybe one of you can go back and check whether you can do it much more practical algorithm in log n time. Yes.
Do you see this say something about number of bars and number of bars that log in as well?
Number of bars are n. Number of bars are n. N is the number of simplices, remember. Number of simplices? No. No. Number of simplices is n. Thank you.